Welcome back to the channel. In our previous video, we took a quick dip into the history and lore of the Cobra Organization, trying to figure out how it was structured with its military ranks. Well, thanks to the feedback of subscribers and viewers in the comment section, we wanted to create a more in-depth view of that topic. So we're going to start all over again, focusing on those first three characters, the Viper, the Snow Serpent, and the Range Viper, to try to figure out exactly what it takes to move up the ranks in Cobra. So as an exercise, we're just going to imagine that we want to join an organization, a ruthless organization like Cobra, for whatever reason. And what would it take for us to start off from infantry and maybe one day work our way up all the way to a Crimson Guardsman? So today we're going to look at the foundations and how that affects these three different characters. Like most collectors, I am a fan of the original G.I. Joe American Hero. Like most of you, I watched the cartoon, read the comic books, and played with toys growing up. And like most adult collectors who lean heavily into army building, I've had a particular fascination with Cobra. Now, as a child, the very notion of army building was a foreign concept. I was lucky to have one of every Cobra character, so the idea of building up an army was pure pretend. Now, however, as an adult, I find myself fascinated with trying to make sense of all this grand army I've been amassing in my collection. First off, it's necessary to recognize that Cobra is not a nation or a state, so it is not subject to what we would consider a traditional military. So it's not going to be necessarily a one-to-one correlation with the military that we are familiar with. Cobra is an organization. Now, back in the day, it was simple. Cobra the enemy consisted of only three figures introduced into the original toy line. There was a Cobra Commander, Cobra Officer, and Cobra Trooper. The ranking system was pretty clear. You had your standard Cobra Troopers being led by Cobra Officers and commanded by Cobra Commander himself. Beyond this early iteration, however, things become much more complicated as more and more new characters are introduced. So let's start with the ground floor, the basis of any fighting force, the infantry. So we're going to imagine that we are enlisting into this Cobra organization. We would most likely begin as Cobra Infantry, where our secondary military specialty would be sabotage. Now, Cobra Troopers, or as we used to call them back in the day, blue shirts, as they appeared in the original cartoon, are the basic infantry forces under the command of Cobra Commander, and made up the bulk of this nameless, faceless legions of Cobra Organization's fighting forces. They may be the grunts of this vast army, but they are nevertheless highly trained in combat techniques and highly skilled in the use of explosive infantry weapons, martial arts, and sabotage. This is very important because the file card is very clear that these blue shirts, these nameless infantry Cobra Troopers, are pretty well trained. Keep that in mind because as we introduce more and more new Cobra characters, this starts to change a little. Now, the Cobra Trooper, the infantry forces, these faceless, nameless grunts are made up of mercenaries, thugs, and assorted criminals. Cobra Troopers are trained to battle in any location, in the chilling Arctic, the silent sea depths, or a crater of an erupting volcano. Their key advantage isn't just their training, it's also their sheer nastiness. Every one of them is bad to the bone. They have no code of honor and will use sabotage as easily as their weapons if it means they win and the other guy loses. They swear absolute loyalty to their leader, Cobra Commander. Their goal is to conquer the world for their own evil purposes. I quote from the file card, "If we can't defeat them with firepower, then we'll get them with pure meanness." Back when there were only three figures in the line for the enemy, the Cobra Trooper seemed to be pretty well trained. But in the late 1980s, the Cobra Trooper became designated as the Cobra Viper. The uniform and look changed drastically, but the Cobra Viper continued to be the backbone of the Cobra Legions. If there's a dirty job that needs doing, these guys are the first in line. These frontline forces are heavily equipped and highly trained for battle. Within their vast ranks are subdivisions that have received focused preparation for land, sea, and air combat. These are things we will explore in the future, but they are highly motivated, superbly trained, and formidably equipped. All Vipers are issued a combination assault rifle / grenade launcher, the rifle part of which can function as a short burst assault weapon, a sustained fire cover support weapon, or a long-ranged sniper rifle with advanced light intensification, night vision, telescopic sight with an advanced light intensification, night vision sight with built-in rangefinder. They wear multi-layer body armor and wraparound acrylic / composite helmets with built-in radio telecommunications gear as standard issue. Now, even though they are superbly trained and formidably equipped, they are looked down upon by the more elite Cobra groups simply because they are basic infantry status. However, this actually means they fight even harder, just to prove that plain rottenness gets the job done as well as, or better than, all their specialized training. They're ready, willing, and able to cause harm and do damage anywhere that Cobra Commander says them. Now, one subscriber named Spaceman Spiff 3052 confirmed that Larry Hama himself made no distinction between the Vipers and the regular Cobra Troopers. Hama sent a note to Hasbro saying Vipers can be the generic term for all Cobra Troopers. However, most fans consider the Vipers to be the next step up the ladder from the starting level blue shirts. If you want to get anywhere in Cobra, you have to start as a Viper. That's the bottom of the pyramid. And serving in the Cobra infantry is a small price to pay to gain access to the glittery prizes at the top. Cobra doesn't reward success with parades and medals. They offer material wealth, power, and an outlet for the terrible urges that drive the greedy, the envious, and the cruel. Now, if that doesn't make a Viper a dangerous opponent, nothing does. So we see that if we want to start off in this organization, we would start off in the infantry. Now, as fans, we may want to tweak what Larry Hama himself has stated, and perhaps in our personal headcanon, we can imagine the Viper as being a more well-armed or well-kitted out version of that Cobra Trooper. They definitely have more body armor, a better helmet, and they're also got a much better weapons system or weapons platform. Now, some people want to suggest that when the Vipers came into the lore, this is when Serpentor was in command, and that as a slight to Cobra Commander to kind of show that he wasn't as special as he thought he was, the basic infantry trooper now donned a helmet that had the nice shiny chrome dome like Cobra Commander, who used to be a unique amongst his ranks. Now, maybe as a pointing the finger at his inferiority, Serpentor makes the lowly grunts look just like him. I don't know how true that is, but it is an interesting thought. So we have the Cobra Trooper, and then we have a more well-armored version of that called the Cobra Viper. Now, both of these seem to be pretty well trained and prepared. However, there is a slightly less trained version called the Cobra Anti-Armor Trooper. Now, the Cobra Anti-Armor Trooper is a Cobra infantry trooper whose specialty is anti-armor. These basic infantry troopers are given the bare minimum in combat training, handed a rocket launcher, and sent out into the field to fire at anything that gets between them and their destination. Their rocket-propelled grenades are simple yet effective, capable of blasting through even explosive reactive armor on advanced battle vehicles. They take pride in the simplicity of their weapons and quietly scorn the higher-ranking troopers with their technologically complex systems. So I guess if you're starting off, the most basic version of the infantry would be the Cobra Anti-Armor Trooper. Now, another subdivision of the infantry would be the Cobra Night Watch Trooper. This is a subdivision of the nameless, faceless legions of Cobra Command. Each Cobra Trooper is highly skilled in the use of explosives, all NATO and Warsaw Pact small arms, sabotage, and martial arts. So the Cobra Night Watch Trooper seems to be a step up from just the typical infantry trooper, being a little more skilled with sabotage and explosives and trained a little bit better in the use of different weapon systems and platforms. Above that would be the Cobra Python Trooper. Now, the Cobra Python Trooper is the basic infantryman of the Python Patrol made up of Cobra Troopers and is cross-trained in at least 2 supporting skills such as computer operator, cook, and ordnance supply specialist. Unlike most armies where the specialization is the norm, Python Patrol expects its computer operators to be as proficient with assault rifles as he is with a word processor. So the Cobra Python Patrol is basic infantry for the Python Patrol Cobra, where this shows a higher level of skill and training than your typical blue shirt or Viper. So if you want to get to the Cobra Python Patrol level, you'd have to go through either the Cobra Anti-Armor Trooper, Cobra Night Watch, Cobra Viper to be placed into the Cobra Python Trooper. Now, if you're good at what you do, you may become Cobra Python Patrol Assault Viper. Now, this comprises the bulk of the elite Python Patrol Corps. Each is highly trained in experimental weaponry, explosive ordnance, and stealth infiltration. Fluency in several martial arts forms is required with focus on close-quarter melee combat. Python Patrol Vipers are outfitted with radar and thermal detection resistant clothing, the same used on all Python Patrol vehicles, making them hard to identify with instrumentation, even at close range. They are the black ops of an already wicked organization. To Python Patrol Vipers, wreaking havoc isn't just a sport, it's an art. They make masterpieces of mayhem. So if you want to to progress up the ranks, the next step would be to be accepted as a Cobra Python Patrol Assault Viper. Now you notice that all of these levels have been trained in sabotage and explosives, but the higher we go, they're starting to get more and more specialized, more and more attention. And in this level, the focus also expands to stealth infiltration. This is important because if you want to end up being a range viper or an eel, you have to be able to be stealthily and infiltrate. This is very important. So above that would be a Cobra officer. Yes, we have just been talking about infantry. Now we get to the Cobra officer, which is specialized in artillery and intelligence. The Cobra officers are also frontline fighters who lead infantry into battle. Many are also believed to be operating as spies at defense plants, nuclear power facilities, etc. All are martial arts experts, masters of disguise, deceit, and demolition, qualified experts in the AK-47 assault rifle, PM-63 machine pistol, M16, Ingram M11 submachine gun. This means that if you ever aspire to become, for example, a Crimson Guard, you have to at least have been a Cobra officer to even be considered. The Cobra officer is where you start to learn how to be a spy, how to blend in, how to be masters of disguise and sabotage. Now, above the Cobra officer is a higher rank. Just one step up would be the Cobra Python officer. He is trained in Cobra leadership schools and is required to take special courses in stealth tactics that utilize the advantages of the Pythonizing process. He is a qualified air traffic controller, artillery spotter, and infantry leader. His proficiency with second-generation digital keyboard message devices enables him to coordinate infantry, armor, artillery, and air support instantaneously in code and without audio transmission. So you can see by the description that the Cobra Python officer requires a higher skill level in training than just a Cobra officer. So if these two are in the room, the Cobra Python officer has seniority. Now, before we can talk about the snow serpents or any other specialized rank, we have to acknowledge the Cobra frogmen eels. The eels are the underwater demolitions experts. These are the specialists of the Cobra legions serving in the Navy. They man and operate the Cobra Marine outpost disguised as offshore drilling rigs and augment the crews of larger Cobra naval vessels. Eels undergo a rigorous 2-part training program in the warm shark and pirate-infested waters of the Cayman Islands in the Caribbean and in the frigid dark depths of the North Atlantic. Their training regimen includes marine structural engineering, explosive ordnance, underwater fighting techniques, and maritime geology. They are primarily focused on missions requiring stealth and precision, conducting special operations in maritime, Arctic, and mountainous environments. Their specialty is underwater demolitions, and their secondary military specialty is marine engineering. So, before you can become a Cobra Eel, is most likely you would be picked from the ranks of a Cobra Python officer. Now, this means that you have a higher level of education and skill set. When we talk about the Cobra Eels, we can't miss out on the Cobra Polar Assault Trooper, also known as the Snow Serpents. The Snow Serpents are the Arctic specialist branch of the eels, the Cobra frogmen. They must undergo the same rigorous training program as the eels, with the addition of a 6-month cold weather course somewhere above the Arctic Circle. Other aspects of their training include airborne operations under Arctic conditions, of course, anti-tank procedures, and the use of snowshoes, skis, and kayaks. They undergo rigorous leadership course that trains snow serpents in small unit tactics under extreme conditions. If the eels are the elite of Cobra naval branch, then the snow serpents are the best of the best. How else could you characterize an individual who could parachute onto an ice floe in sub-zero temperatures and then be prepared to march 50 miles with a full field pack, assault rifle, and anti-tank weapon? Their primary military specialty is Arctic operations. Their secondary military specialty is, of course, infantry. Everyone begins in the infantry. Everyone is being taught demolitions and explosives. So these snow serpents would have undoubtedly mastered the skills of using their anti-tank weaponry early on in the process as they got refined throughout the ranks. But that's not all. There exists a layer above the snow serpent. It's the Cobra Paratrooper, part of the airborne infantry/infiltration. They are called Cobra Para-Vipers. The Cobra Para-Viper troopers are the deadliest, most highly trained commandos in the Cobra legions. They specialize specialize in high altitude, low opening jumps to go behind enemy lines or infiltrate unsuspecting countries or targeted facilities to conquer, steal, or cause generalized chaos. They are experts in conducting raids to seize, destroy, or capture enemy personnel, equipment, or facilities. These raids are characterized by speed, precision, and a high degree of surprise. Cobra Viper troopers are selected from the ranks of the Cobra Eel troopers and are chosen for their exceptional audacity, independent attitude, and utter fearlessness. They are given a parachute, instructions, and not much else. Their purpose is to go in first and pave the way for the main assault force. Jumping out of a plane into cold, thin air when everything is pretty much a speck below you and there's nothing to keep you alive but some thin fabric sounds like a completely insane thing to do. And that's right, it is. That's why they do it. So, if you want to become the most elite commando in the Cobra ranks, it begins with going through the infantry, working your way up to the Python Patrol officer, working your way into the Eels, and then possibly, I would imagine, though it doesn't specifically confirm that you would have to have been a Snow Serpent before you can be accepted as a Cobra Viper. Both are pulled from the Cobra Eels, but as you recall, the Snow Serpent is also trained in parachuting because they can parachute into those enemy territories, but the Cobra Viper is even more skilled with those halo jumps. Now, last but not least, we want to take a look at the Cobra Wilderness Trooper, the Range Viper. Range Viper troopers are usually committed to long-term operations deep within unfriendly territory, completely cut off from communications or supplies. Training covers physical fitness, land navigation, survival, languages, cultural understanding, advanced tactics, and specialized skills. They have an unusually high tolerance for discomfort and can survive on a diet of snakes, grubs, roots, berries, nuts, and whatever slow rodents they can catch. They are expected to build their shelters out of indigenous materials, usually rocks and mud, and procure their own ammunition by way of hit-and-run raids on enemy ammo depots. Now, Range Vipers are favorites of Cobra High Command since they are so inexpensive to sustain. Once they're in the field, they don't cost anything to feed, clothe, and arm. They don't care who they shoot as long as they shoot at someone or something. That's why Cobra High Command makes sure they stay out in the bush. Now, I would consider the Range Viper to be a mix of what we know as the Army Rangers and the Green Beret Special Forces. Range Vipers serve as an elite, highly mobile, and adaptable special operations force. Their primary function is to focus on direct action raids, forcible entry operations, and special reconnaissance. They are trained to operate in diverse and challenging environments, often conducting missions deep within enemy territory. They are known for acting as a stay-behind guerrilla force. Their core mission is conducting unconventional warfare, enabling resistance movements through psychological operations and guerrilla tactics. This includes actions like seizing airfields or other key terrain to enable larger follow-on forces to deploy. So it's difficult for me to determine if the Range Viper is higher or lower than the Eel. It seems like their survival skills and their skill set would be something that comes from being able to survive any kind of harsh environment, which would include surviving in the Arctic. So I would imagine that if you have qualified to become a Snow Serpent, you could very easily transition into a Range Viper if you chose to. I think it would either be a lateral move to transition to that, or perhaps a step down. I'm not sure if the Range Viper is ranked higher than the Snow Serpent, because when we talk about the Cobra Eels, we're already talking about a specialized force, but they are technically in the naval branch of the Cobra Organization. So perhaps the Range Viper is the Army version of that. I don't know. Comment down below what you think, if the Range Viper is also on par with the Snow Serpent, but just instead of coming from the Navy, maybe they're coming from the Army. Either way, through this video, I hope that we've been able to establish some of that hierarchy in ranking the Cobra troops, that you would begin in the infantry, work your way up through some of the subsets to hopefully become an officer, and one day become a Python Patrol Assault Viper or a Python Patrol officer, which would give you the ability to apply perhaps to one of these other specialized core groups like the Eels, where you can receive additional training to become a Snow Serpent or a Viper, or perhaps even a Range Viper, depending on the environment. So hopefully this video has served as a form of education to kind of get your headcanon in gear. Either way, I envision the Range Vipers as a small unit that is able to communicate effectively, shoot, communicate, move, and it probably doesn't blend in well with straight up infantry because they probably can't keep up with these guys. These guys are very rugged. They are survivalist. They can live off the bare minimum, but their job is also to raid and resupply so they can have what they need to continue to wage war. So they are pretty independent, pretty outgoing, pretty fearless in that aspect. So I think they would be a small operating unit, but in my headcanon, it always helps to have a range viper in your unit. So perhaps you have an infantry with some Cobra Vipers and they're hitting a target. You always want to have a range viper with you because these guys know how to get dirty and they can either help pave the way for follow-up forces or be a stay-behind force to help destabilize that enemy territory. Either way, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Leave a comment down below which rank we should focus on next, or if you disagree with what we've presented, or if you have some additional information that would help make this even better, we'd love to hear it. Leave a comment down below and let us know. Until next time, remember, at the end of the day's gonna end. So make sure you did something you love.
Don't forget to smash that like button if you want to see more content like this, and leave a comment down below to let us know what you want to see next.